Across the country, museum exhibits are disappearing, all because of new federal regulation outlining what is permitted to be researched or displayed when it comes to Native American history. But who are the people most impacted by these measures, and what has the response been by some of the country's most renowned institutions? As we approach Thanksgiving, in a month that we take time to celebrate Native American heritage, we decided to take a deeper dive into these questions. Our Stephanie Ramos has more.
Ray Halberter has traveled more than 200 miles from his home on the Oneida Indian Nations Reservation to come here to the American Museum of Natural History in the heart of New York City.
It's a little bit emotional. It's a little bit more of an effect on me than I sort of realized. As the leader of the Oneida Indian Nation, I'm here because one of our ancestors has been held here for more than 100 years.
But to understand why Halberter traveled this distance, we needed to learn his family's and his native tribe's storied history.
How did so many ancestral remains from the Oneida Indians get to museums so far away?
Many of these items were just simply stolen. They were just plundered and sold. We were reduced from a 6 million acre reservation to 32 acres.
The Oneida Indian Nation's rich legacy is deeply intertwined with America's own history. George Washington himself signed a treaty in 1794, recognizing their sovereignty. Members of the Oneida Indian Nation among the first allies to fight for American independence during the Revolutionary War.
Our people hiked in midwinter to help feed George Washington's troops.
What made you come back to this area?
Well, this is where our heart is. This is where my heart is.
His heart and their reservation just outside Syracuse, New York, and now roughly 18,000 acres after much efforts made by Halberter to reclaim their land.
Western expansion happened in the United States, especially in the 1700s and 1800s. So the United States moved Native peoples to reservations. At the same time, there was a great rise in scientific study and curiosity about who Native peoples were. And so those archaeologists and anthropologists came in and took what was there because there were no Native peoples there to protect.
There was a profit to be made by people who plundered such items. There's a value.
Halberter tells us they even heard from a museum in Japan, informing them they have an Oneida cultural object in their collection on the other side of the world. According to federal documents, human remains of one Oneida ancestor were taken in 1898 from their resting place by Oneida Lake, sold to a collector who later gifted them to the American Museum of Natural History in 1917, where they have remained since.
Those remains were recovered from the banks of this lake.
Well, it's so important and it's so emotional because I'm a descendant. And these are our people, these are our grandfathers and our grandmothers.
Today, some of the displays here inside the American Museum of Natural History are closed after new federal guidelines required institutions to obtain consent from tribes before displaying and researching cultural items. That meant a lot of exhibits showcasing Native American history like this one were closed.
It's a process known as repatriation, and thousands of institutions across the country are handling similar requests from Native American tribes, all under a federal law from 1990 known as NAGPRA, which stands for the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act.
Anyone can imagine how they would feel if their relatives were being held in an institution, their bones were being pulverized to do radiocarbon testing. The right thing to do here, which is what NAGPRA envisioned, is to return these people.
In 2023, the Secretary of the Interior, Deborah Haaland, the first Native American woman to serve in this role, ushered in new updates to the regulations implemented in the original 1990 law, for the first time giving museums and federal agencies clear requirements for returning these culturally important objects and ancestral remains, as well as giving institutions strict timelines, including a deadline of 5 years to update their inventories.
Did you see more of a change?
The institutions are getting much more serious about returning these items. Collectively, of all the 13 institutions that we've been working with, we had 90 of our relatives returned.
According to our ABC News own station's data analysis, more than 500 institutions across the country have over 128,000 identified ancestral remains in their collections and 90,000 yet to be identified. This data now available through a new app developed by the ABC own station's data team.
In 2023 and 2024, we saw a lot more institutions publishing inventories of Native American remains and sacred objects, which then means that tribes have the ability to make a claim for those ancestors and sacred objects and bring them home.
Our ABC-owned stations across the country canvassing the institutions in their cities, which have shuttered or removed exhibits in Houston's Museum of Natural Science, in Chicago's Field Museum, and in Los Angeles, the Fowler Museum. Our data team also finding that some of the institutions with the largest collection of ancestral remains are not museums, but academic institutions.
Academic institutions have some of the largest Native collections, and that's mainly due to the fact that they're trying to attract students and researchers who will bring with them lots of grant funding, but it also helps build that institution's notoriety in academic circles with the research it produces.
Even though the law was passed 34 years ago, the process of repatriation for many tribes was severely delayed.
Many institutions use loopholes in the old regulations to never really get the work done. So the new regulations were created to shore up what the act required, which was simply that one form of evidence, for example, where an ancestor was buried, as enough evidence to return that ancestor.
The Oneida Indian Nation's lead archivist, Candace Watson, calls on institutions to be transparent about what they hold in their collections.
I don't think that we're interested in placing blame or anything, trying to instill any type of guilt in any university or museum. We understand that these things were done. There's nothing we can do now to change that, but certainly they can be more proactive in locating these items within their universities and their archives.
Back in New York, the American Museum of Natural History is working closely with the Oneida Indian Nation to return their ancestor in the coming weeks. ABC News own stations also confirming museums in their cities following similar paths toward repatriation with multiple Native tribes.
It seems like so many more institutions are recognizing the wrong that was done and are now trying to right that wrong. Do you see that here? Do you feel that here?
Yes, I feel that, and I think that's what's great about what we're seeing here.
The American Museum of Natural History recently unveiling a new section highlighting their repatriation efforts, also offering classes on Native American history for children.
Native people will work willingly with museums to do it in a way that's respectful to their own people. They want to share who they are. They want to share their culture, but just in the right way, in the Indian way. Everything we do is for our children benefit, that they see a better world where they're respected, their ancestors are respected, and treated with the appropriate ceremony and respect they deserve.
Like any other people, we too wish to honor our deceased according to our way of life.
How does it make you feel to know that so many ancestors are coming home, are coming back to this land?
Oh, it's wonderful because it starts helping our people. It's a healing process for us. It's righting a wrong. It's helping our people become more complete again as a people.
Descendants trying to find ways to heal. Our thanks to Stephanie Ramos for that, as well as our own stations, WLS Chicago, KTRK Houston, and KABC Los Angeles for their participation in our report.